Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our workshop entitled How to Pay for Long-Term Care. We are so happy that you've decided to join us today. We're excited to provide you with exclusive information and resources that will give you a deeper understanding of us and our services. My name is Emily, and I'm the Marketing Director for Clinkscales Elder Law Practice. We're actually celebrating our 40 years in Hays this year with our main office located in Hays and our other office in Wichita, and we do serve clients and families throughout the entire state of Kansas. I would like to invite you all to type any questions that you may have in the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen. And then throughout the presentation, you can type in your questions. And at the end of the workshop, we will address any of those questions or concerns that you may have. So without any further ado, I would like to just hand it over to our president and attorney, Randy Clinkscales, to get us started.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And Emily, thank you. Emily's parting words to me before we started was, after she sets up my computer, don't touch anything. So I'm very careful here not to touch anything on my computer that would cause me to be disconnected here. As Emily said, if you have a question, we would appreciate your typing it into the chat box so we can respond. And what I'd like to do, if right now, if you would just let us know that you're hearing us okay by putting a Y for yes in the chat box, or if you're having some trouble putting in for no, and then we'll just wait 30 seconds or so to see what kind of responses we're getting.
Lots of Y's already, Randy.
Okay. So let me just share, this is, I have not done a presentation or a workshop like this in a while, so I am really happy to be here and to to visit with you. Part of the reason is that this is one of the most common questions that we have of people contacting our office is how we're looking at long-term care, or maybe they've been through an experience where a relative went through long-term care and they didn't know how to pay for that, or they felt like they ended up being financially devastated. So it is just a very common question. Want you to know that we will provide to you a copy of this workshop slideshow, this PowerPoint. So I'm not going to read every word of it as we go along, because I do want to leave some time in case you do have questions. So what you're going to discover today is ways to pay for care, how to protect your spouse and preserve and protect a business or an investment, and how to stay at home. And that, to me, that's probably the most important part of our practice, is how to work with families to stay at home as long as possible, how to put a plan in place. You're going to hear me repeat over and over again about the need to plan. And I will share with you, one of the observations that when I was getting ready for today is I've never had a client regret planning. And let me repeat that. I've never had a client regret planning. And so this is for you if you're wondering how to pay for long-term care, if it's necessary. And so, just talk a little bit about that. Long-term care doesn't necessarily mean the nursing home. It can be any time that you need assistance with your own care. If you're concerned about losing everything, the long-term care costs, this is for you if you're wanting to be sure your spouse is protected, or if you're wanting to pass on a business or property to your family. And it's for you if you're wanting to stay at home and out of the nursing home as long as possible. When I interview clients, typically what we do is we start off with healthcare issues, and because I really need to know that about what's going on. So even though they may feel like they're healthy, a lot of times getting into what's going on healthcare wise affects the type of planning that we do. And then I talk to them about the finances and their property. I talk to them about their family and their dynamics and what's going on there. I talk to them about what their goals are. And that's really when I ask them the question, imagine if you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to happen? And so these are the most common responses, and usually that people answer with all of them. I want to stay at home. I want to be able to pay for care and not worry about losing everything. And a lot of people that they're very worried about that when they come into the office. They want to protect their property for their spouse or children and others. And in my case, it's my grandkids. And knowing that your spouse and your family will be protected, even if you need a program called Medicaid. Again, I'm not going to read all of this and be happy to send it to you, but this is one of the very first families that I dealt with. They came to us as I had told them they were really approaching a train wreck. And one of the comments that they had was, I am convinced that without the planning, my father would not have his house in the small farm he grew up on. And the plan paid for itself over and over again. And then finally, if you're wondering how to respectfully care for your aging parents, get a plan in place with this office. Here are my partners, Jenny Walters and Adam Deese. Jenny has been with me now for 14 years, going on 15. It's kind of hard to believe that. Adam has been with us since 2017. And again, time has flown by. We're an elder law firm. And so when I got started in this, I was a general practitioner. I was an estate planner. I did personal injury. I did divorces. But when we switched over to elder care, we are really focused on helping families preserve and protect their dignity, their health, their finances, and their legacy. And again, as I mentioned or Emily mentioned, we have offices in Wichita and Hayes, but we practice most all over the state. And I began my practice in 1983. So who am I? Again, I'm an elder care attorney focusing on aging and chronic care issues, as well as protecting assets from long-term care. The last 18 years have been with that focus, and they've really been the best part of my practice. I want to show you this slide. This is actually a photograph of my family from a couple of years ago. The two young ones are Max and Alex, who are now 3 and 6. My 3 sons, my daughter-in-law, and of course, my wife there in the middle. And I share this because I think I began realizing how important it was that not only did I help other families preserve and protect their resources and stay at home, but I need to make a similar plan for myself. And I really looked at what my goals were in terms of, being sure that my wife was protected, and then being sure that my grandkids, if something were to happen to me, and that I would have something that could be passed on to them. And so why am I so passionate? And so I love sharing my story. I was very close to my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother was widowed in 1984, and then in 2000 she got sick and only was. The doctor said she had 3 to 6 months to live. My mom was going to take care of her. Then, unexpectedly, my mom died. And all of a sudden, I was a caregiver for my grandmother. I was a general practitioner at that time, and I tried to take care of her for 2 or 3 years. I remember this was supposed to go on for 3 to 6 months, and it actually went on for 10 years. But I was a general practitioner, and again, did some estate planning, but I realized that my toolbox was not sufficient to take care of my grandmother. I was not equipped as a regular general practitioner or an estate planning attorney to take care of the very unique situation, the unique circumstances that my grandmother was dealing with. Multiple healthcare providers, trying to stay at home, Medicare problems, on and on and on. And so I began teaching myself about elder law and learning about elder law. My biggest lessons, however, were from my grandmother. And what I learned from her is the most important thing was that she wanted to stay independent. She wanted to stay out of a nursing home. She didn't have a lot of resources, but she wanted to maintain them so that she could take care of herself and live the lifestyle that she wanted. And probably the big one for me was that I realized that even though I was the lawyer in the family, I needed assistance to take care of my grandmother. I needed someone to help me navigate the system, whether that was home care, whether that was outside help, whatever it was, I needed assistance. So, I began working with my grandmother. As I said, it went on for 10 years, and I'll get into the details more about what we did with her. But let me share with you, it was a blessing to get to work with her. It taught me about compassion, and it gave me compassion. So another testimonial, this was a family that he was told when his wife got sick, he had to sell his home and his farm, and he thought he was going to go broke, and we helped him save his farm for himself and his children. So long-term care does not have to devastate your finances or your family if you get a plan, if we have a plan in place. So you're going to discover really 3 things today. How to pay for long-term care costs, and there are a bunch of tools out there that you may already have in your toolbox. There are tools out there that we can develop for you. And then how to pay for long-term care, and then how to stay at home. So how to plan for long-term care. Planning avoids cost, and you're hearing that word again, planning, planning, planning. But planning allows you to protect what's most important, and planning allows you to stay in control. This is a family that the 65 and 62 had some farm ground, had kind of some cash, not a lot, but they knew that long-term care costs are anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000. And let me just share with you, the last 2 or 3 months, we've seen huge jumps in long-term care costs, even locally, huge jumps up to close to $10,000 a month. Is the kind of going rate. So we're seeing a lot of $300+ a day for nursing home care costs. So this family that we were working with really wanted to protect the land. They're again young, healthy. 65, 62 is young in my office, but we were able to develop a plan to put their land into a special type of trust, an irrevocable trust. It protects their land from long-term care costs. It protects them from lawsuits and bankruptcies. But the important lesson here was to start before there was a crisis. And this is another case where actually, and this, I can tell you when this was, it's actually 2017. This family had just purchased some long-term care insurance. It was quite expensive. It had poor coverage. So we were aware that there had been a law passed called the Pension Protection Act that allows us to access some long-term. In this case, what we did is we purchased, helped them purchase a life insurance policy that had a long-term care rider. If they have, and it's a one-time pay, so there's not an annual premium, it can't go up. If they have a claim on the life insurance, if they have a claim on the long-term care side, all it does is decrease the benefit of the life insurance policy. So, and so typically, I have long-term care insurance, but if I don't use it, then when I die, it's gone. So everything that I paid on it is gone. And again, that's, I understand that going into it. So these hybrid policies are sometimes attractive to people. We don't sell them. We just help families access those. But again, what we're looking for is tools that may be out there that are attractive to that family and what would work for that family. So again, it would be a different situation if the Schmidts had been in poor health. That tool might not have been available. What was interesting about this case was actually their children made the appointment for them. Their children were afraid their parents were not doing enough. So even though we did the hybrid policy, we still did a revocable trust and powers of attorneys and all of that sort of stuff to get everything tied up. Again, we want to get a complete plan for this family. So if one of them gets sick, that we have a plan in place that will help them obtain their goals. So what do you need to do if you're wanting to plan for long-term care costs? Meet with our office for a strategy session, and we'll talk about that more at the end. It's absolutely essential that we get strong documents in place. We want to design a plan on how we're going to pay for care, and whether you want to stay in your own residence or some other setting. And then we want to implement that strategy right away to avoid roadblocks or changes in circumstances. And I guess I want to pause for just a minute because I'm going to use that P word again, planning. It just seems like every week or every other week, I hear families say, "Oh, I wish I had planned earlier," or "I wish that when I first heard you talk, that we had decided to go forward and plan at that time." So again, the P word, planning, the need to plan. As they say, to not decide is to decide. And so just would really, if you get nothing else out of this, you really need to get some plan in place. So let's talk about how do we pay for long-term care. And again, with planning, you can decide how we're going to pay for care. So in my case, I have some long-term care insurance, and that's how I'm going to be able to pay for my care for a period of time, but it will run out. So then I have some alternate tools or resources that are going to help pay for care, so that my wife is not financially devastated. So you don't have to go broke if you need long-term care. And we're going to talk about using government benefits to pay for care, such as Medicare, VA, and Medicaid. So this is a plan using resources to pay for care. And let me just cut to the chase here. This Mr. Johnson had had a stroke, and they were going to discharge him to a non-skilled facility to be near his wife in Western Kansas. Instead, we showed her that if we discharged him to a skilled facility, that Medicare would pay for his care for a substantial period of time, and he would get skilled care so that he got better, and give him the best chance to get rehabbed from his stroke. We also tapped into her long-term care policy to make some home improvements so that she could bring him home. And so she had actually called us from the hospital. So the bottom line is we got 4 things done. We got Medicare benefits extended. We got the health improvement he needed. Mr. Johnson was eventually able to return home. And we only used a portion of the long-term care policy. So we still have it to protect assets. And then let's do another one. This is from 2020. And this is a case of a young family that the husband was diagnosed, I think he was about 60 or 62, with early cognitive decline. And at first this was devastating. Actually, the neurologist had them call us from her office. And so we met with them, and of course they were terribly upset. Although he knew something was wrong, he had recognized it. But the bottom line is that we visited with them, showed them how this does not have to be devastating, that this, he could be doing great for a long time. Our care coordinator started working with them. We protected the land. We showed him how we could put stuff in his power of attorney that would allow his wife to protect more property later on. We put in the power of attorney about what type of care he wanted if he ever gets to the point where he cannot make his own health care decisions. And then we conveyed that to his family so that when that time does come, they're okay, everybody's on board. And it was just interesting. The second time we met, it was just a completely different meeting. They were laughing and kidding around, and he's still farming, but just having a plan in place was such a relief for this family. So let's talk about a couple plans that deal with Medicaid. So this is an unusual case, this first one, but it's a great case. So there was a law called the Deficit Reduction Act that was passed, and it actually gave you credit for if you took out long-term care insurance. So as an example, typically in Medicaid, I don't know if you know how much you can keep, but if you go on Medicaid, all you can keep in cash is $2,000. Everything else has to be spent down. There's some exceptions for your homestead and a car and some stuff like that. But think about that $2,000 mark. In this particular case, the family was about to start dividing resources and spending Mrs. Johnson down to $2,000. When we got involved, we realized what type of policy she had. She had a long-term care policy that had already paid out $300,000 for her care in assisted living. And the bottom line is that we were able to protect $300,000 for her and another $150,000 for her husband. And so she was eligible right away, and Mr. Johnson's going to end up with $450,000. in cash resources to take care of himself. And Medicaid cannot place a lien on their property because of the benefits that we were able to tap into. So that was a great result. That was a complete surprise to the family. It's completely opposite of what they had been told reading on the internet and what they'd been told by the nursing home. So it was a great fun case with a great result for this family. So let's talk about using Medicaid in a more critical situation. So Mr. Goforth or Mrs. Goforth had Lewy bodies dementia. They had Mr. Goforth had some retirement, a $300,000, a joint account of 60. He has $1,500 of Social Security income, and Mrs. Goforth has Social Security income of $800. They were told by the nursing home they would have to need to spend down all the resources before Medicaid would help. There would be a lien on the home. Mr. Goforth would have to use his income to pay for her care. We used some Medicaid tools in some legal documents that allowed us to restructure their resources. As a consequence, Mr. Goforth was not forced to go broke. We were able to transfer all the resources over to him using some exceptions in the Medicaid rules. There's no lien on his home, and that's important. So if he decides he wants to sell it and maybe retire someplace or move closer to his kids, he can do so. He was able to take all of his wife's income. So his income went from $1,500 to $2,300. We were able to, our care coordinator is working with him to be sure that his wife's getting good care. Sometimes, and I read into this the other day, sometimes there may be situations where VA pension benefit is available. It's about $2,200 tax-free. It didn't work in this particular case, but a family I worked with the other day, the husband was basically served during the Korean War conflict. And so as a result, we're going to be able to tap into VA benefits. And that was a case where they didn't have a lot of resources. And so the VA benefits are really, really helpful. So, you know, I made a note to myself here that so much of law today is practiced in coffee shops and the internet. And so I want you to be really, really careful before you read something on the internet and try to act on it, or something you hear in the coffee shop. I actually had a woman, a daughter, a few days ago, last week, that was some type of engineer, and she'd read a bunch of stuff on the internet, and she really had her parents going in the wrong direction. And so at the very least, she had already cost her parents $8,000 on a mistake that she made, which was really unfortunate. So again, when you're trying to pay for care, planning in advance, there's some options there. We want to look at what tools may be out there. You special trusts, long-term care insurance, hybrid policies. We can look at private paying and what is it that we want to private pay with. And I have clients that do that. They say, I'm going to set aside this resource, and if I need long-term care, I want this to be liquidated and used to pay for my care. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I want to have a plan in place, because the next thing you know, I get some kid saying, hey, that's the quarter of ground that I wanted, or that investment was something that was supposed to go to me. So we want to be sure that you are able to plan for it. Long-term care insurance, I know it can be tricky and know it can be expensive. I always tell clients, you got to read the policy. When you're filing a claim, you've got to follow the language in the policy. Don't try to just wing it. Sometimes we can convert life insurance into long-term care. And then again, there's a special law that allows us to do that. So when you're paying for care, family assistance, that's paying for care. Is it community resources, like what can we tap into, Meals on Wheels, senior companions, so forth. And a client that, Joe, that we were able to tap into a bunch of church resources for him to help him get through a time when his wife was sick and he was trying to take care of her. VA pension we talked about, VA home health, Medicaid. Again, some things we have to be aware of. There's, if you transfer away property, you can apply for Medicaid for 5 years, or you get penalized. Sometimes we look at a program called Home and Community-Based Services, which is a great program. It's very tough out here sometimes because of limited staffing, because of staffing problems, but it provides care in the home or even care in assisted living or independent living, either one. So again, just a lot of tools out there, and that's kind of our job, is to direct you on those tools and find which ones would help you and which ones are available in your area. My father Henry and I met with this firm and decided to hire them. Best decisions of our lives. Next one I want to talk about, if you're trying to pay for care, let's get you in as soon as possible. Let's explore funding resources. Don't change anything before you come in to see us. So sometimes people drop their life insurance or they drop their long-term care insurance or whatever. Don't change anything until we get you in here. Get in place strong powers of attorneys and other estate planning documents. Powers of attorneys, broad powers of attorneys, powerful powers of attorneys are probably the most important document that I feel like my client needs, because that defines what I can do for that client. Our goal is to find, get, and pay for good care without going broke. I like to share this particular slide because Pat and Pat has given several testimonials for us, came to us at a time that was very difficult. She was really struggling with so many things, bitter about her husband being sick. And I thought, and she ended up being just a very close friend of our office. My husband needed nursing home care. You guided me through the process. Your care coordinators make sure he was getting good care. And what I want to add to you is that when she said, our office will guide them through everything that goes on, things we never expected to go through. And that resonated so loud with me, so strongly with me, because when I was taking care of my grandmother, I never realized that I was going to be going through this. And it was my first rodeo. And so I could not have done it without the assistance of people in my office, care coordinators that had experience in long-term care. So let's talk. I want to talk to you about probably my favorite topic, and probably the most important thing that I feel like we do for families is how to stay at home. Before I go into that, sometimes I hear this, that my mom's in the nursing home and she's getting good care and nothing's going to go wrong. A long time ago, I used to ride bicycles, and there's this kind of joke was there are people who have fallen off of bicycles, and there are people who are going to fall off of bicycles. And so I can virtually guarantee you that if you have someone in long-term care, there are going to be challenges about their care. Now, will you know it? Will you recognize it? Will you know what to do about it? Those are the questions. And when I was taking care of my grandmother, I didn't know what care was supposed to look like. My most important goal with my families is to stay at home. There are options. It's not your home versus a nursing home. Support for the caregiver is key, because when you're a caregiver, people will argue with me about this. You have blinders on and you get tunnel vision. It happens. I've been there. It happens. And then how do you stretch financial resources to make that happen? Well, this is another picture of my grandmother. And I've kind of told you a little bit about, I was suddenly a caregiver. She was down to her home and $60,000. She was going through a lot of depression because of my mother passing. My mother was her last of 3 children. My grandfather was also had also passed away. She was actually on hospice twice while she was in Fort Worth, but she wanted to live independently and alone. Kind of one of the quotes that she said, and we always kind of laugh about it, but it was very, very serious. And my grandmother had a bad experience with a nursing home with her own mom. And my grandmother, when I was trying to get her to move up to Kansas, said, honey, I know someday I will have to go to the nursing home. I just don't want to know about it. And so I, again, greatly respected my grandmother and really wanted to try to carry out her wishes. And so I did a poor job of finding resources in the Fort Worth community, but the best resource I found was hospice. We kind of battled back and forth. Were able to keep her in her own residence for 6 years, but there was a decline. And so I moved her from Fort Worth to Hayes. She was actually on hospice again. And then she got into assisted living, and guess what happened? She got better. And I'm not advertising for assisted living, but she got better. We got her medications under control. My care coordinator was working with her and with me on what good care should look like. She advocated for my grandmother at the facility. We did a lot of workarounds to fit my grandmother's personality. And so at the very end, she spent about 50 days in the nursing home, and she died at age 96. So it was quite a journey. And so the lesson for me was, with proper guidance, you can stay at home longer. The transition can be gradual. The support for a caregiver is critical, and resources can be stretched to achieve goals. And I hear this over and over again. Oh, we don't have enough money, or we have too much money, or whatever. It's really all the same. It is, how do you stay at home? How do you do it successfully? How can the transitions be gradual? Guidance for the caregiver is critical. This is a family that actually, this was a younger spouse. Her husband had Parkinson's. She had a daughter from a prior marriage that she was trying to raise. And we helped her keep her husband at home as long as possible. We were able to tap into Medicare and Medicaid during that time period. And he eventually had to transition to a nursing home, but we were able to protect resources so she could be sure that her daughter was going to have something after she was gone. So what do you need to do if you're trying to keep a loved one at home? And so if they're facing aging or chronic care issues, so, a lot of times I will share with you this time of the year, we get a lot of phone calls because the kids come home and they see mom or dad has deteriorated. You know who they see deteriorates? It's the person that's the caregiver. That's the really alarming observation that they make. So don't wait. The longer you wait, the greater the crisis and the more limited the options. But don't give up. There are solutions in most every case. This is a family that we worked with. The children are 7 hours away. And, the comment was, you've given my sisters a great deal of relief knowing we don't have to wonder anymore about what's going on with mom and dad. And so we were, the care coordinator was actually able to get her dad to accept some help in the home and allowed him to stay there much longer. So far you've discovered there are ways to plan for the possibility of long-term care costs, and the plan will protect your spouse, your family, and your assets. There are multiple ways to pay for care, either private resources or public benefits. And finally, with proper care and planning, you can delay or avoid the nursing home, allowing you to stay at home longer. So, hope you get this one thing. Here's the P word again. Proper planning with an expert provides the opportunity to stay at home, to be sure you protect your family and preserve your assets from the devastation of long-term care costs. So how do you make this happen? Again, we've talked over and over again 3 times about setting up a strategy session. And so what will happen is that we'll have a short phone call with you to find out what's going on, to be sure that we can help you. If we feel like we can, then we'll schedule a 60 to 90-minute meeting in person or by Zoom or by telephone with me or one of our other attorneys. And then we'll discuss what's going on, your financial and legal needs, what kind of, if you're dealing with a chronic illness, about what's going on there. We want to review your current estate plan, and we want to talk to you about what are your goals. Again, if you could wave the magic wand, what do you wish would happen? If you are dealing with a chronic illness, we'll talk about ways to stay in the least restrictive environment. And then everybody's questions are unique, and we'll answer those. So at the end of our time together, you'll have an idea about an analysis of your current plan. You'll have much better clarity about your issues and goals, and I think that's the big thing that comes out of that meeting. We'll talk about different ways to achieve those goals, and then we can let you know the exact investment it's going to be to achieve the goals. So after our meeting, the most important thing is you have to decide to get started. And once you decide, we'll start drafting a summary of the plan, what legal documents we need to get into place. We'll schedule a time to sign those documents. Then we need to implement the other tools and steps, such as how property is to be titling, if you need to work with your insurance person on maybe some long-term care insurance or some other alternatives. If you're dealing with a chronic illness or aging issues that require assistance, we'll have you meet with one of our care coordinators to see what direction that we feel like, what direction you may want to explore. Again, the nice thing about that type of planning is that, we don't have a dog in the fight. And so we're just trying to be an objective person for you. So because you attended today, we'll schedule that strategy session free, but there is a catch, and we're going to schedule 6 spots in the next 4 weeks. And so if you do want to book a strategy session, call this number, 877-325-8040, or actually Emily is going to send you a link on SurveyMonkey that you can check there. And so my guarantee to you is that you're going to, after that strategy session, you're going to know more than you do today. You'll have an idea about what happens if you do nothing, and your time's not going to be wasted. So again, to book the strategy session, call the number on the screen or get the SurveyMonkey that we'll send to you. And if you do, then we're going to give you a gift of a book that I wrote a chapter in, Don't Write a Blank Check to the Nursing Home, and a written summary of our recommendations. So free strategy session. Emily, I am going to turn this over to you now.
Yes, we do have one really great question here. Randy, does an irrevocable trust, if past the 5-year look back, protect assets where a revocable trust would not?
Maybe. Sometimes we have to be careful, because recently, as an example, somebody had an irrevocable trust that I examined. And while it was irrevocable, it was still an available resource for Medicaid purposes. So you have to be very careful. To me, it's kind of like saying, I have a pickup. Well, what kind of pickup do you have? So is the irrevocable trust drafted in a way that the resources inside it are unavailable for Medicaid purposes? And many times they're not drafted. That was never their intent. And so it's not a criticism of that trust. I'm just saying it's not the right pickup. So we'll always have to be, I can't, without examining that trust, I cannot tell you that it's going to protect the resources. Hopefully it does. But again, it's really going to be determined by how it's drafted and what type of language is in there. So it's a real legal question.
Perfect. Thank you for covering that, Randy. It looks like we don't have any additional questions in the chat box at this moment, but please feel free to take this time now to add your question as we go ahead and wrap up our presentation for this morning. I want to just kindly remind everyone that you will receive that follow-up email Randy mentioned that contains the important items. It includes a recording of this session, and we provide that to you so you can share this with family members, friends, or colleagues that weren't able to make this session today, or just that way you can go back through and take notes on all of the really important topics that Randy covered, since it was a lot of information. And then it also contains a SurveyMonkey link, and I did put that link in the chat box for you to complete. As Randy mentioned, there's only a few spots left for the year, so we really want to try to get people in as soon as possible. If you fill out that quick 2-minute survey, you'll receive that completely free strategy session where you speak with one of our attorneys about your unique situation and ask any of those questions that you have. You can also go ahead and call the 877 number on your screen whenever, if you come up with questions about the presentation that you couldn't think of now, if you have questions about how the strategy session works, feel free to call our office at any time, and we're always happy to chat with you. I'm going to do one last call for questions, and I don't see any. So thank you all for joining this morning. Thank you, Randy, for sharing that information, and go ahead and fill out that SurveyMonkey, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.